Alright, for part 1, as you can see, there's 3 different graphs, A, B, and C. And the question is, which does not belong? In other words, which picture is different from each other, and why? And how can we make it belong? So, I'll be screen recording these 3 graphs and explaining them. So yeah, let's get right into it. So let's get started. So we have these 3 graphs, and I want to see how each graph is different from each other, and how can we also, at the end, make it belong to each other. So let's get right into it. So for graph A, as you can see, there's something called a cycle. And what is a cycle? A cycle is a path that starts and ends in the same point. Well, where's a cycle in this graph? Well, if I start from this point, there's actually going to be a cycle. So if you want to go from this point, and then we take a path to this point, then we take the path from that point to this one, and then we come to this starting point. As you can see, the path starts from the same point and ends in the same point. This is called a cycle. And this is kind of like a triangular shape, and there's this white space, or this, we can say a gap, and we can kind of fill it in to see that this is a cycle. And another difference is that this is the only graph that it takes 3 moves in order to get to another point to another point. So for example, what I mean is that if I want to go from this point to this point, we need 3 moves, right? Right? So that's 1 move, that's 2 move, that's 3 move. If I want to go from this point to this point, I also need 3 moves, right? This is 1 move, this is the second move, and this is the third move, right? So the difference here is that there is a cycle. Let me just write this down. Cycle. And now I can just write like 3 moves, right? 3 moves. Right, perfect. For B. Now what's different about B is that if we look at this point, right? This point is connected to all of the other points that surrounds it, right? It's connected to this point, right, with this line. It's connected to this point with this line, connect to this point with this line, connect to this point with this line, connect to this point with this line, and then again connect to this point with this line, right? Like this. Let me just connect it to just show you guys. So right, so I can just say, let me just write like, I don't know, connected. And let me write connected. And another difference is that in order to get from another point to another point, you need 2 moves, right? In graph A, we only need 3 moves, but in this graph, we need 2 moves. So that's 1 move. If we want to go from this point to this point, right, that's the 1 move. And we need a second move that goes here. If I want to go from this point to this point, we need, again, 2 moves, 1 point here, and 2 points there, or the second move there. So we can say we need 2 moves. 2 moves. All right, lastly, let's take a look at C. So C is the only graph, if you can see, that is disconnected, or these 2 graphs are not connected to each other, right? Right. This is one separate one. You can see this is one separate one, and this is another separate one, right? So we can say disconnected. Disconnected. Let me just write that E again. All right. And another thing is that it's the only graph that has a point with 2 neighbors, right? For this point, there's 2 neighbors, right? So there's one and this one. So we can say 2 neighbors. 2 neighbors. Sorry for that handwriting. It's a little bit. All right, 2 neighbors. Now, how can we make each of this graph alike, or the same or similar, right? In this graph, right, there's a cycle, right? And there's 3 moves, right? We want to add a cycle, right? Maybe another point that starts and ends at the same point, and we want it to be 3 moves, so something similar to this. Same for this one. In order for other graphs to make it become other graphs from graph B, you want it to be connected from 1 point, right? From 1 point to all the graphs with only 1 move. and that it takes one point to another point, and it needs two moves, right? We want that to happen. For graph C, we want it to be disconnected, so these are separate, these are not connected, these two graphs are separate, and that one point should have two neighbors, right? This point has exactly two neighbors. So yeah, that's all I have.